Hello and welcome back to the space between ideas. I'm playing Case, freezing cold in the country of Georgia. A little bit of some of the differences between Fogg's motivation model and Buchhold's drive model. And we realized that this is kind of like descriptive and aspirational, where this is proscriptive, meaning this is like task specific. How do I get this task done? And when we talk about the concept of a facilitation trigger, then what we're saying is we want to break the task down into something like really small, and then we have to decide whether we need some prompting or some education or a tool to help us to get that job done, or if we already have those skills. But nowadays, now that we have AI, so then it means that this is actually not that difficult of a process because like AI can just basically give us some instructions and say, okay, this is how you do it, or this is the tool. Then the idea is like spark trigger. So what happens when you're just not really into it, you're not interested, you don't really want to do it, then you need some kind of spark. And I think both of those things are already inherently inside of the application that I've been designing. The only thing that's really missing then is this concept of, well, now I have two problems. One problem is I need to compare, I need to go through these chapters of the book that we've been building. The first chapter we built, the first section of the book is built on Tom's drive model, and then the second part of the book is built on Fogg's motivational model. Here specifically, this is the thing I'm thinking about right now. So if it's aspirational, then the question um, is there is there some place where you're going to be keeping track of this? And is it important to keep track of this? For example, let's say I have like a mentor, and I'm talking to the mentor, and then the mentor is like, so where it comes to this part of your life, how do you rate yourself for your level of effort? And how do you rate yourself for level of success? And then you could rate yourself, and then you could say, all right, so what are some things that you could what are some things you could do to improve your level of effort? And then what are some things you could do to improve your level of success? That's relatively simple, right? Now, is that actually part of this? So if your green zone is a full video game and social media, but your red zone has health and finance, okay, guide the student to audit their life against the big three. Exactly. So it already has that in there. Hmm. So I'm just wondering, like, what did we get from the Fox motivation model? The village is in shock. The hardest working man who plows for 14 hours a day is being outperformed by a lazy dreamer who only works 1 hour. The dreamer has outsourced the engine and transmission of his new invention, but something strange happens. Even though everyone is motivated to use the new tool, most fail and walk away frustrated. Motivation is the spark, but if the working element is too hard to control, the engine stalls. Instruction: explain that every task has a calling, and some tasks feel like they are pulling you toward them. High motivation, while others, like a heavy weight, you have to push. Low motivation. Explain what happens when a student has a level 10 motivation but level 0 ability. They fall into a pit just like the young man in the story. Point out that the repeated failure without a dopamine hit success actually drains the future motivation. Introduction: facilitation trigger concept. A facilitation trigger is a tool or a prompt that makes a difficult task suddenly feel easy. The young man, the young men were motivated, but the task was too hard. They need a facilitation. So I think that this education is necessary. They need, because the thing is, when you're using Qubit, then it's not necessarily true that somebody would realize that they need to break that task down into smaller and smaller parts. And and I mean, it's true that the app does it. It does have that functionality, but it's and it could be intuitive for some people, but other people, they just won't see it. They won't realize, like, oh, so this is too difficult. I didn't know what to do, and then they quit. Then they leave the app, and then they go play video games. So that's why we have the mentor, because the mentor is going to be like, hey, well, you need to understand that sometimes you're going to need a facilitation trigger. And then they say, well, how do I do this facilitation trigger? And then they say, well, inside of the app, you're going to have to break it down into a very specific sub element, a subtask until it's actionable. And then you have to ask yourself if you know how to do it or not. And if you don't know how to do it, then that means you have to design some kind of exercise around developing the skill to be able to take that step, which is actually deliberate practice. But it's the same concept comes from the facilitation trigger. The facilitation trigger is like it's asking you to take some educational path. Help the student identify where they are currently stalling, and are they stalling because they're low to motivation, or because the plow is currently too hard to steer, to highly difficult. In this story, the patient young man worked together to understand the plow. They created a facilitation trigger, a way to make it easier. Mental check. Think of your hardest goal. If I could give you a magic handle that made the first step 90% easier, would you do it right now? Yes, this means that you have high motivation. You just need a facilitator. Maybe this means we might need to look at your motivation levels first. Yeah, model is it's important, and it's not completely encapsulated by by Tom's drive model. And then, and I don't know where to fit the piece. Like, I mean, maybe it's in there already somewhere in the education, but I don't know if we should add it into the app. Like, for example, a screen that's where a person's supposed to describe where their level of effort is currently, and where they would like it to be. Yeah, so I don't see that in just the individual doing that on their own inside of the app. So we want to keep the app simple to things which are effective and easy to do, and drive progress. All right, I'm satisfied with what we got right now. All right, so so now we're on to the so this isn't necessarily functionality implementation anymore. The functionality, yeah, we got the functionality down. Implementation, I don't know about this is actually a different word now. This is progress over time. All right, so this is good. I'm going to remove this, and I'm going to remove this. What are you doing, Gordon? He's just licking his hands. Buckle's drive model, the Fogg's motivation model. Process value chain. So we need to talk about the process value chain. And I think that's it. That's the only thing that I feel like as a low level, like hands person, I think that these are the three essential concepts that we need people to understand. Like, let's say I was going to do a performance review with some employee. Let's say I'm going to do a performance review with myself. So the first thing I would do is, in fact, I did this. I would try to identify like how much time is required. So let's start with the Buchholz drive model, and then we'll go to the Fogg's motivation model, and then we'll go to state styles. So the first thing I would do is say, okay, so bird's eye view, what direction am I going? So descriptive and aspirational. I would say that in the last 5 years in the last 10 years that I've been working on this task, I started out at the one. I started out with like I didn't understand anything, and I remember I was in Moscow, and I had this one student, And I was trying to teach him stuff from Tom's book, and he just kind of mocked me. Like, he said, "Well, why don't you like learn about all the other ideologies and coaching methodologies and everything like that first, and then you could be able to compare them, and then you'll be able to see where this fits." And I was just like, I don't want to do that because it takes me off of the path that I'm trying to go. So I did the other way. So I just started teaching Tom's work, and after teaching Tom's work for years after year after year, eventually I had some students that were like, "Hey, uh, like I'm tired of like those ideas. I've listened to you to explain it 10 times, and I need other information." That's when I started expanding into other coaching techniques and other coaching methodologies. And it was interesting to be able to see them from the perspective of having some foundation with Tom's work first. I mean, we could go into Tom's book, and I could like take a second look. You know, what do you want to add? What else do you want to add into this book? Like state synergies for hands? No, it's impossible. State synergies, it's an executive level, it's a manager. State impact is it's a manager level because you're making decisions between two different paths, and hands are you're just giving them orders, they're following orders. State progress, no, because the state progress is for planning the entire endeavor. State styles, yeah, that's what we're going to talk about after in a few minutes. State purposes, it's really difficult for people to understand state purposes and to understand how that has some kind of relevance. It's more for like introspection after you've learned all the other checklists, and after you've thought about like what you are as a like a mechanism in this world, then you can start to see, oh, okay, that's what motivates me. That's what it's really complicated. It's really difficult for people to grasp. Assumptions. Assumptions, sometimes I talk to researchers about this, and we were able to break down the foundation of thinking based on the outcomes and making decisions. So this is also managerial, specifically for um, the analyst. Teamwork, teamwork. No, that's for like mergers and acquisitions. Tendencies. It's always been a challenge for me to understand that one. That's a combination of like three other checklists. Inventiveness, not for hands. Drive, that's the one that we've been talking about, the drive model. And resources. In resources, the hands aren't responsible for thinking about resources. So yeah, so I've been through all of Tom's work, and for the hands, I think that styles is useful. All right, let's go to styles. So you can see that the concept here is that hmm. So this is to analyze how work is or could be done. So let's have a chat with a fireside chat with ChatGPT and build the final chapter of the educational courses. And then we'll have the three courses. Yeah, I would say that I moved from I was like when I first met Tom, I was like at a 0 or 1. I told Tom I wanted to learn how to do business, and I spent 10 years thinking about it, and now I understand it. It's just like it's it's this little cycle of making plans and the decisions you have to make in order to make those plans, and the vision you have to have in order to start to move towards some objective, and then it's implementing those plans and then reflecting on it. Took a long time to figure that out, I guess. I think figuring out things, it's like a lot of figuring out is like, how confident are you with the answer? Like when you do a test, it would be interesting if you had a test where they had test questions, and after every test question, you have to respond with the answer, and then you have to respond with how confident you are that that answer is correct. That would be interesting. And because the confidence level, it means like going back to the state assumptions checklist. It's like, okay, so did you have good, or like how useful and how relevant was the data that you studied? So okay, so you have a question, like a you have a test question, and the question is going to ask you. It's asking you how well did you digest the course material, and you can't digest all of the course material, so you're only able to digest some percentage of it. So the test question, it at first it asks you the question, and then it asks you, okay, so how good, how like what was the quality of the data that you studied, and then also how relevant was that data in order for you to answer this question. All right, so that's the first. All right, then the next one is like, after you studied the information, what kind of insight were you able to develop? And then, based on your knowledge, how confident are you that you have the right answer? That's state assumptions. Hmm. All right, let's get into this process value chain. So let's go down to the bottom. Gordon, I'm just tired of listening to you licking your hands constantly all day long. Why are you licking your hands? Because you're a dog, I know. Okay, fine. But I'm getting tired of listening to that. I don't think he understands. Okay, here we go. So when we talk about this section, very, very few students ever get to this section. It's easy to talk about people, level of effort, and level of success. And then when you think of yourself as a system, talking about your ability to utilize your capacity, or what's known as optimization, and your ability to upgrade and therefore either delegate or use automated systems, it's not as easy. What's your purpose? What do you want to do? When I ask the question, what's your purpose and what do you want to do? We're talking about potential. And then, so when we talk about your level of automation, then to some extent, we're asking you, like, how well are you able to guide interactions? Now, these days, if you look at like N8N or Make.com, so these are, or Zapier, what used to be called Zapier. So Zapier was back in the day, and now everyone's saying it's too expensive. And then Make.com, it's like, that came out, and now N8N came out to compete with Make.com. What they're saying is that it's not really about, it's not just about connecting people, but it's also about connecting systems. So you have all these different websites, and they all have to be able to connect together in order for your thing to work. And I learned that firsthand because I've been playing with these vibe coding tools for the last 8 months. So I wanted to keep up. I thought this was important for me to keep up with this technology. So to as well as I'm able, I've been able to keep up somewhat, and I've been constantly testing out different projects. I remember the first time when I tried to learn how to code. Um, it was just really, really difficult for me. But I could understand the concept behind it. Not the concept behind coding. That was always a mystery, because it's all about mathematics and solving mathematical formulas and then thinking about things in abstract ways. And it was just like always difficult challenge for me to do that. But I could understand the concept of, if you have a lot of examples and if you have like a lot of projects that you're working on, you're going to gain experience, and then you're going to use those experiences. You're going to accumulate different types of experiences to the point where you are able to understand like how to solve more and more problems. Coding for me was your ability to recognize and solve problems. So, in other words, pattern recognition. And um, so I was so happy when vibe coding tools came out because it can handle a lot of the the pattern recognition. I finally watched the that Y Combinator YouTube video, and I believe that Gary was right. He said like nobody's really been able to have like a one person business, 100% vibe coded business, where they use vibe coding to solve all the problems. Which means two things. One thing is that vibe coders that don't have a foundation in software programming, um, the vibe coding tools are not yet good enough to be able to handle all of the issues. And then the second problem is vibe coders, they don't really understand all of the issues, and so they don't know how to use vibe coding tools to solve those issues. So it's like the chicken and the egg. Like which is who has the bigger problem? Is it the coding tools that don't know how to code? Like they make too many mistakes and so they can't make scalable software? Or is it the vibe coder that doesn't know how to prompt the vibe coding tool and so they don't know how to create scalable software? In either case, the vibe coder is still not satisfied with the production quality of the end result of the project. And I've tried to build around 5 or 6 projects, and I always get stuck at some point, and then that's it. Like, I mean, one thing that was good on on for me was just like realizing that personally the project that I'm building, it took me this much time just to figure out what is it that I'm trying to build. That's what brought us to the qubit moment. But then also, like, I just built a lot of different little projects, and I was never able to get any of them past the finish line. And they never did the things that I wanted them to do. And they always got, I always had problems with the software. I always had problems with the tools, and just never was able to build anything. I mean, am I going to go back and work with some of those projects in the future? Maybe, but then suddenly, like, on Instagram, I started getting hit with like all these different like messages. It's like somebody already beat me to the race. This happened to me a lot when I was a kid. I used to always get dreams of like or visions of like something that the world was going to produce in the near future. And I could see like, well, if you do this, then you could get rich, or here's a problem that people are trying to solve, and here's the solution. And then like 6 months later or a year later, suddenly I'd see it on the market, and I was like, wow, I saw that. There were so many times where like I saw that coming. And then now, like a lot of the tools that I'm trying to build right now, it's like now on Instagram, it's like, oh look, here it is. Here's your solution. This is what you were building, exactly what you were building. Like the LinkedIn, one of the LinkedIn little products I was trying to build, I saw the exact solution that I was trying to build. And the guy, he just like he made an Instagram post. He said, look, this is exactly what you were trying to build. And I was like, yeah, that was exactly what I was trying to build. But then it goes back to, do you want to automate everything? Because there's this other strange thing about like scaling. And yeah, scaling to some extent is good, but you also have to have some personal relationships with people. So you have to decide like who is it that you need to have personal relationships and who is it that you need to scale. All right, so that's guiding interactions. Next is exciting motivations. So if it's computer, then obviously you don't need to excite it because it's already excited. It has electricity. But humans, you have to find ways to, and like if you don't have personal contact with people, then how are you going to motivate them? So, like I was saying, there's some amount of interaction that has to be motivational, meaning that people enjoy working with you, you enjoy working with them. And then involve resources. What kind of resources do you have access to? What kind of resources would you like to have access to? I used to have this one little thing called Rule One is consistency, increase the frequency of occurrences. How do we get consistency? Processes and purpose. Follow a process, have a purpose. What are some processes that you might like to develop or optimize? What are some driving forces in your life that could help you to be more consistent? Hmm. So this is something that that Qubit doesn't actually tackle. It's not asking you to identify driving forces in your life, but this is a really hard one to put into an app. And Tom put this into his book, and it's really challenging for people to understand. Sometimes people say like you could be a really good worker, it doesn't make you a really good manager. So then they take the person who's really good at doing the job and they put them into a management position, and then what happens with that person is they go and manage, and then they're like, "No, you're doing it wrong. Let me do it." So you don't get an actual manager. You get somebody who wants to like do it for everybody because nobody else is doing it right. I don't know, like maybe you don't necessarily want your manager to know how to do everything, and then the manager's forced to rely on you. And then they have to try to figure out like, what can I do to help you to get this job done? And then what are the things that I can do to empower you and to remove blockers and to help you and to motivate you? But it's still your responsibility. I don't know, but this is getting closer to what I'm trying to talk about with the process value chain. In fact, this might be a good place to start. All right, let's jump into the googly goo. All right, so I have decided to completely remove the deliberate practice from the educational experience. And the reason I did that is because the elements of deliberate practice are theoretically they're quite simple. Basically, there's 2 points. The first point is that you have to have some understanding of like the framework behind what it takes to play some role. And so when after you pick a role, then you're going to be selecting some categories of skills. And then once you've collected those categories of skills, then you're going to decide on the elements that you need to work on. And I feel like for my application, the audience isn't necessarily going to naturally have the skill to create a vision and understand the categories of skills that are necessary in order to become better at that role. And I feel like even kids in university these days, they don't necessarily have like some people, they know exactly what they want to be when they grow up, but not everybody knows like what exactly are they going to have to work on and develop in order to become that specific role. And so what happens in general is that a lot of people they just find out that they're like good at certain things and then they start to slowly move towards that thing, and then they end up taking a job where they're like already something that already interests them, something that they're good at. And so having the ability to list specifically what are the categories of skills and functions that you will need to master in order to become that role is not necessarily high on my priority lists. And then the other thing is when we talk about how we need to develop some kind of exercise in order to develop the skill required of an element, which is an associated with a category, that already is incorporated within the concept of Fogg's motivation model. Because Fogg is saying that, well, if you have no action, then you're going to need a facilitation trigger or a spark trigger. And if you have a lot of motivation, but you don't exactly know how to do it, then you're going to need a facilitation trigger. So that's already the concept of deliberate practice. It's already inside of Fogg's work. So I don't think that we need to add units, which are I've already deleted all of the deliberate practice sections from the education. But now we want to move on to the next section. Are you ready? What's it saying? Should transition to course to implementation. We have identified this that success isn't just about trying harder, it's about your level of effort meeting your level of success. We found that our location on the Buchholz matrix and identified the red zone tasks, the ones that are important but are currently stuck. The bridge explained that we are now moving from understanding why we are stuck to implementing a change using the Fox behavioral model. Logic of action, likening. And reiterate that the student doesn't need to be a visionary or an expert in deliberate practice. They only need to recognize two feelings: frustration, I want to do it, but it's hard; annoyance, okay, but we did that already. All right, good. Shall we begin with the first unit of the implementation course, or is it another transition? Right. So now we're going to be moving into the implementation course, and I also deleted something out of the implementation course. So currently, the only thing that we're going to be teaching in the implementation course is the Buchholz state styles checklist, and we're going to be calling it the process value chain. And since we only have two courses, Buchholz drive model and Fogg's motivation model in the first section of the course, I'm probably just going to remove the wording that divides the two sections into skills. Oh, I don't even remember what it was. What was the first one? I think it was like foundation or functionality. Yeah, it was functionality. So I'm just removing the section that said functionality and learning. I'll just delete it myself out of the course. And we also don't need to specifically say that this is the implementation aspect of the course. All right, so let's begin. So we're going to talk about the third section of the course, which is going to be, well, let's start with this. So here's a warm-up activity, and the warm-up activity is just kind of getting people to answer this question. So how do we become more consistent? Because consistency is how we are going to be able to get major improvement in our lives. Consistency means that we have a process, and it also means that we have a purpose. If we're able to follow a process and we also have purpose, then it means that we will have the motivation that we need in order to follow the process. See, in the Fogg's motivation model, we were talking about what moves somebody from inaction to action. And one of those points was the facilitation trigger, and the other was a spark trigger. Now, both of those ideas, they kind of remove, not completely. See, in the idea when we talk about motivation, the concept of motivation, feeling highly motivated, has some connection with the idea of having a purpose. And when we look at the Buchholz drive model, it's the same. So when we look at the ability to put in like a high level of effort, that means that there must be some feeling of purpose. And then when we talk about having the ability, the spark trigger, or if we talk about level of success in Tom's work in the Buchholz drive model, then that means that there is, to some extent, we have some kind of process. And within the Qubit application, there is this concept of breaking things down into smaller and smaller subtasks, and which means that what we're actually doing is when you have 4 steps to accomplish a task, that is technically a process. And then when we break down one of those steps into sub-steps again, or subtasks again, then we are simply adding more detail to the process. And the whole app is really about how you can follow a process. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you feel purpose. And so what we want to talk about now is let's go back into let's take some examples of things that you wrote down, some ideas that were important to you in the previous 2 sections from the Buchholz drive model and from the Fogg's motivation model. And now I want you to list some processes that you might like to develop and optimize, because if you're able to create processes, then it means that you will become more consistent. So let's list some processes that you would like to develop, and then also talk about some driving forces in your life that could help you become more consistent. And that's not just general purposes about how to become like what's driving you in your life, but also you want to become more specific and you want to attach specific um, purposes to the processes that you're engaged in. Now, the major now after you've completed that first exercise, we want to go on to the next exercise by answering the next two questions. One question is how do you develop strategies to better manage self-defeating behaviors that sabotage my efforts? So when we talk about this, then what we're talking about is like we want to develop some processes. These are positive processes. These are processes that can help you in your life. And these are processes that can help you succeed. And those are some driving forces that are going to help you to maintain those processes and to optimize those processes over time. But in fact, you also have other processes which are defined as self-defeating behavior. So sometimes you're doing things that sabotage your efforts. These are also processes. So it means that when you are engaged in some process, suddenly you jump out of the task and then you do something which sabotages your efforts. And these self-defeating behaviors, we also want to look at those things. And we want to think about like what's driving those behaviors. And can we reverse that somehow? Can we understand why you're acting out in a certain way? And then to think about some strategies for better managing those self-defeating behaviors. Also, we want to talk about like how you can monitor and sustain your energy level and your willpower because sometimes when you're doing some kind of task and then you just suddenly don't want to do it anymore, it's not necessarily true that you've lost your purpose or you don't feel like strongly about like that doing that process anymore. It doesn't mean that you have to quit. Sometimes it just means that you're tired, and sometimes it means that you've done enough work during the day. And so it's also important to understand how you're going to monitor and sustain your energy level and willpower. All right, so we got the next course. Left side. Major improvement isn't a one-time event. It's a result of consistency. To be consistent, you need two things: a process and a purpose. Linked to the previous union's purpose provides drive and motivation. We saw the Buchholz and Fogg models process. What Qubit Connect builds for you when it break is for you when it breaks tasks into four actionable substeps. Identifying and optimizing processes. Instruction: ask the student to look back at the red zone tasks as they selected at the end of the last course. Help the student list three specific processes they want to develop. And the purpose anchor. For each purpose, ask what is the specific driving force behind this? What is the purpose? And managing saboteurs. Consistency is often broken by self defeating behaviors. These are shadow processes, automated actions, and sabotage your efforts. For example, you start work process and the shadow process of checking your phone takes over. Explore why these behaviors happen and are they the reaction of frustration? Are they a search for a quick dopamine hit? Energy and willpower. Instructor, teach the student that quitting isn't always a lack of purpose. Okay, yeah, it's okay. It's a good way to start. Okay, next. Okay, the next section, it's about, I don't know, should we add this? I don't know who developed this. Uh, well, I think we could discuss this without necessarily, well, I think we already did discuss it to some extent. Because driving forces are basically the purposes, and then restraining forces are a lot of things that are trying to stop you. Um, I don't know. I have a good joke related to this. I think we already talked about this. Okay. Okay, so let's begin with the process value chain. So the principle here is that massive success is the result of owning the results of complex processes. And sometimes people they say, what's the difference between owning a business and having a job? And then we can give the example of, for example, let's say that you're a lawyer and you do legal work, and then you decide to create your own private practice. So what's the difference between you working in a company as a lawyer and you working having your own legal company? And so the difference is going to be how much work you actually do. I think the difference between um, owning a business and just working for a company is who owns the process. And then the value is of owning a process. So if you work for somebody and say you do legal work for somebody else, you're charging by the hour. And then whoever owns the business, whoever owns the major process which you are a part of, they are getting more value from your labor than you are getting from your labor. And that's why they've hired you, because they, with your help, they are able to complete their process. And you're not able to take full benefit of that process. Now, so you decide to have your private practice. Unfortunately, when you start a private practice, what you find out very quickly is that you also have to do sales and marketing work. And then so you have to do not only the legal work, but you also have to do the sales and marketing work. But you own the process. So maybe it's true that you are able to charge more money for that process as compared to how much money you were earning when somebody else was paying you to do the process for them. But that's completely dependent upon whether or not your ability to provide some process that you own has more value than the process that the other person owned, where you are a part of their process. Now, the real value of owning your own business is when you can delegate those processes. So after you've set up certain processes and mastered the processes, then you're going to delegate those processes to other people. Now, that's the foundation of the process value chain. This is the world of process development and optimization. And there's three sections. The first section are current processes. And current processes, they aren't necessarily the most important thing for us to focus on, because if you already have a process and you're able to list the steps of the processes, then the only question that I'm going to ask is, like, are you motivated and are you educated enough to do those processes? If you already have processes and the processes are clear and you know exactly what needs to be done, the question is, are you doing it or not? So if you want to get value from this section of the processes, then the question is going to be, can you list processes that you already understand completely, but you're not fulfilling those processes? And of course, we've already talked about that because if you already have processes and you understand all the steps, that means that it is the thing that you need is a spark trigger from the Fogg's motivation model. But the answer is different if we look at the Buchholz drive model. And so what's the difference? Well, what we're going to talk about is two other elements of the process value chain. We're going to talk about how to build a new process, and then we're going to talk about how to improve current processes. So from the Fogg's motivation model, all we see is that we have a list of processes, and either you have enough motivation and enough skill to do the work, or you do not have enough motivation and skill to do the work. But when we look at the Buchholz drive model, then we can take a step further because there's one box of the Buchholz drive model, which is very interesting and something that is not contained in Fogg's motivation model. And this is a box where we move from what we were looking at before. So before effort, and we were saying that, hey, you need to move from laid back to diligent. You need to move from recollecting to striving. And then over time, you're also going to be able to move from trailing, which is a low level of success, to leading, which is a high level of success. So what we want is that you're going to become highly competitive. We're going to move from recollecting to striving to competing. But there's one more box. So if you want to move from recollecting to striving to competing, then the thing that you're going to have to do is you're going to have to build new processes, or you have to implement your current processes. But there's this extra little box, it's called coasting. And what happens in coasting is that you reach an extremely high level of success. And then suddenly what you find is that you're actually able to reduce your level of effort and achieve the same level of success. So what that is about is improving a current process through, for example, merging aspects of processes or automating aspects of processes. So in the first section, of course, we've already talked about it. So I want you to to write the section about how to discuss current processes and how you can use the Fogg's motivation model to make decisions about like processes that you already understand and whether or not you are motivated and whether or not you have the necessary ability to do those processes. And then once you finish that section, then we'll move back to the Buchholz drive model and talk about how to build new processes and then how to improve current processes. I'm not sure that this is capturing everything I want to say. We often have processes we already understand completely, but simply aren't doing it. If you know the steps for its motivation. Oh, it's already kind of there. It's the audit. Okay. Yeah, I might have to do that. I'm gonna have to edit this anyways. So, all right. So let's start with the world where we have some processes, and okay. So if you are starting like if you have a new project and you're not sure where to start, one place to start is may sound a little bit strange, but what you need to do is um, you may have to stop doing something which you are currently doing. All right, so imagine you have a square box, and inside of the box you have all of the activities. So, and if you do those activities, then you're going to achieve a goal. So we'll put a small blue box on top of the larger but empty green box. The green box, it's only the frame of a box, and the blue box is colored in. It's a blue box. And the blue box is very, very small compared to the large green box. So you're going to do a whole bunch of activities. And then after you do those activities, you're going to be able to achieve your goal. You're going to get the result. So when we talk about the first element of building a process, it's called nil. And you can also call it start and stop. This is when you want to begin creating a process or winding down a process. There's two questions. One question is, what are activities in the process that you want people to start doing? And in this case, it's you. So if you're going to start a new process, then the question is, what are some of the activities that you will need to engage in order to achieve the result that you're hoping to achieve? So, and this brainstorming activity will give you some ideas that you can plug into the Qubit application. But at the same time, if you're going to start some new processes, it's also likely that you may need to wind down some other processes. And the question is, what are some things or processes that you want people to stop doing? And in this case, it's you. So, what are some things that you're now doing that you probably should stop doing so that you'll be able to free up some time and be able to begin some new steps to begin some new processes? All right. So then, as you can understand, that as soon as you start these steps, then you're going to be moving up from the a low level of effort to a higher and higher level of effort. Every time you take action, you're improving your level of effort. Unfortunately, when you start new processes, it's likely that you are going to be in a haphazard position or meander while doing. Oh my goodness. green. Is that the last thing it says is moving to green? Yeah, okay. All right, so let's get started. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is moving from a low level of effort to a higher level of effort. About this subject, what we're talking about is like in the value chain, in the process value chain, we're talking about building a new process. We're going to move. The three steps for building a new process are called start and stop, haphazard, and tentative. Let's begin with start and stop. With start and stop, what we're talking about is something called nil. You could also call it nil. And what it means is that when you decide to um, start a new process, you also need to consider what processes you need to wind down. And so there's two questions. When we talk about building a process, you're going to have to build that process inside of like a box. So imagine you have a box, and inside of that box, you want to build the process. This could be like when you look at like an engine for a car, or when you look at a computer. All of these things have some like a bunch of parts that they're put together in a certain way so that you achieve a certain result. And so we're going to draw out a box, and then inside of that box, we want to start to write down some behaviors or activities that you want to start doing. And your hope is that by doing those things, you're going to achieve a specific result. And then you're going to draw another box, and then you're going to talk about some of the results that you're achieving, or some of the things that are happening in your life that you actually don't want to happen. And in order to stop getting that specific result, then you're going to have to remove some of the behaviors from that box. All right, I'll give you two examples. So let's talk about health. If we talk about health, now if you eat cake and you eat candy and you drink chocolate milk, if you drink a lot of eggnog, and if you have a lot of high carbohydrate foods and high processed foods, and you eat them all day long without taking any breaks, and you eat bread and you eat cake and you eat donuts, then most likely it's going to achieve the result of getting fatter and fatter and fatter. So these are some examples of things, of behaviors that you would have to stop because you do not want the result of being fat. On the other hand, if you want to become more physically fit, then the result is becoming more physically healthy and more physically fit. You're going to have to add some behaviors into that box. For example, you need to eat more healthy, meaning you have to do some menu planning, you have to do some calorie counting, and likely you will also have to do some type of exercise, whether it be walking, jogging, riding a bike, or something else that you might enjoy. So these are two examples of how we have results that we want to obtain, and then we have results which we are currently obtaining, but we do not want to obtain them anymore. And so whether it be finances or health or some other thing, I want you to write down some results that you would like to obtain and some results that you would like to not obtain. And then when it comes to things that you want, some results that you want to obtain, then start to write down some activities that you would need to do in order to achieve that result. And then also write down some things that you're going to have to stop doing so that you avoid achieving the results which you are currently getting, but you no longer want those results anymore. How is it possible that we're already on unit? Okay, so in the next exercise, we're going to have the same kind of the concept of a box. Now, in this box, we're going to carry on the box from the previous step. So We want to think about the processes that maybe we've already started, but maybe we're not very good at the process. These processes are called haphazard or meander while doing. And there's two ways to look at this type of process building. In this case, you might consider that inside of that box of activities, you have some arrows that are kind of going in all different directions. And you can envision where a person is standing next to a park and they call to the rest of the team, "Hey guys, come over here. Hey everyone, come look over here." So sometimes what happens when you begin to develop a process, there are things being done that look like people are running through a forest blindfolded. So that means that they are, when they hear somebody calling at the side of the forest or park, they start running or going, trying to go quickly. They hit their head on trees, they fall into holes. And in this type of situation, because they're not exactly sure what they're doing, they're not walking on firm ground and they don't exactly know where all the obstacles and pitfalls are, then they are going to start getting hurt and they will have to learn from their mistakes. This is one strategy. So make a list of things that you feel where you feel like you're working on processes and you keep making mistakes and talk about what are some of the mistakes that you've made and how did you learn from those mistakes. Next, there's also another way to meander while doing, and this haphazard technique is related to learning from the mistakes of others. So you can also ask the question as you begin to develop a process, what are things being done that look like people are researching, figuring out best practices, and thinking about how to create a process? And the last section in this area of learning how to build processes is called tentative. It's called experiment with processes. And the question is, are there processes that you are now experimenting with? So the idea is that when you begin a new process, like we started in the section called start and stop, you begin new processes and you stop doing old processes. Then when you move to the haphazard section, then you are either learning how to do something from a textbook, which tells you exactly what to do, or maybe you are testing things out on your own and you are making mistakes, learning from your mistakes. Eventually, two or three or a few basic processes begin to appear. And then so the idea is that you have something somewhat of a process and you're experimenting with these processes and maybe it looks like A B testing or ABC testing. Maybe there's three or four different processes. And you have to pick the best process because eventually you're only going to be able to use one of these processes because you want to take that process and we're going to be trying to figure out what to do to improve those processes in the next section. But when you are working in the tentative box, then you need to ask questions like what are the metrics that you'll be using to make a decision regarding which processes to implement? Meaning, if you have a couple of different processes that they look attractive, then how do you finally decide on which process is best for you and your situation? Next is when you are starting to decide on the metrics. So maybe there's a couple of different reasons why one process might be more important than another process, but you also have to think about those different reasons. Reason A, reason B, reason C, and how much weight do you put on each of those reasons? Because sometimes there's one reason which is much, much more important than all of the other reasons combined. And so the way that you weigh that reasoning will influence your ability to make a decision on which process is best for you. Yeah, we're not quite at coasting yet. Okay. Okie dokie. Oh, I guess you didn't see me doing that. Okay. Okie dokie. So now we're not quite at the point where we can start coasting yet. At this point in our journey, once we have moved from tentative, of course, after tentative, then we are now in the area called process. So now, once you move past tentative and you have established a process that everyone has agreed on, that means that you are now in where we began this discussion, which is this area of being able to list processes. So now we've added a new process to our list of current processes. All right, so we've talked about current, we started out talking about current processes, then we moved about how to build a new process. At this point, you could say that you are now in the area of competing. Because if you have some really great processes and if you enjoy those processes and if you're good at those processes, it's likely that you have now a high level of success and you also have a high level of effort. I mean, at least you have more than 5.1 and more than 5 point you have more than 5.1 on each of those level of effort and level of success. And it means that you've already passed the Fox motivation model because you have definitely have the facilitation, meaning that you have the level of success, and you also have the spark, meaning you have the level of effort. So that means that you are now competing. Once you're in the competing, then most likely what will happen is people will start to ask you to do more work. Because if you're really good at establishing processes and you also are able to get those processes done, then people are going to ask you to do more and more work because they know that when they give you work, then you're able to complete that work. So you're competing. The issue is that to really compete, you have to do more than just complete your current processes. Because as people give you more and more stuff to do, you have to be able to optimize your processes. So in the next section, we're going to talk about improving your current processes. And the way that we'll do that is by merging aspects of processes. And then finally, we're going to move from the competing section down to the coasting section with something called automate aspects of processes. Okay. All right. So let's continue here. So when we talk about the first idea of improving processes, If you want to become a competitor of competitors, if you want to be highly competitive, meaning that you truly take a leading position and you're taking a leading position ahead of other competitors, other people who are good at following and implementing processes, then you'll have to move to the box called embedded. Embedded means that you are going to blend work, processes, and resources with other work, processes, and resources. All right, so you can imagine the saying to kill two birds with one stone, or you can answer the question, how can you achieve better results with the same number of resources? So the the active word here is blend. The blend is the verb, and there's basically three things. So what you want to do is you want to think about how to blend, for example, this work, this process, this resource with this other work, this other process, or this other resource to achieve this result. All right, so there's a lot of blank spaces here. So the first question is, what are the results that you are trying to achieve? And if you are going to achieve those results, then how are you going to be able to blend certain types of work which you are already engaged in? How are you going to be able to blend certain types of processes that you are already engaged in? And how are you going to be able to blend certain types of resources which you are already using? So the idea is that you're going to be using the same type of work to get multiple results. And my question for Google Gemini is, how are you going to be able to turn this into a unit that is easy to understand and interactive so that people can use this methodology to actually think about how they can get better results with the work, resources, and processes which they already have? Yeah, it's pretty simple. It's nice. Here, okay. Activity complete the two birds with one stone plan. List three resources, tools, or apps or skills you already have, and how can you use them in a new way. Yeah, well, I'm gonna have to do some editing with that, but that's okay. It's a lot harder to go from 0 to 1 than it is to go from one to many. Okay, last one. All right, so after you've figured out how to blend different types of work and processes and resources together in order to achieve better results, then you can say that you've really mastered the idea of process development because you were able to begin with a situation where you just had the aspiration of completing one goal. And then you were able to put in some basic activities in order to try to achieve that goal, although maybe you made some mistakes or you didn't fully understand best practices. And then you were able to develop those processes well enough and test out different processes to where you felt that one process could really handle that specific type of work and get the goal that you were looking for. But then you found that as you were more and more competitive, that your time started to fill up because people were giving you more and more work. And so you had to figure out how to blend the work and processes and resources that you had at your disposal in order to achieve more and better results. And finally, with this deep understanding of process development, you now get to move into the section called effortless, meaning it will transcend needing and doing. The idea is that you are going to be able to accomplish a goal without needing to do work. The question is, how can you achieve your goals even as your level of effort is reduced to nearly zero? So you can imagine that this is, inside of Buchholz's drive model, this is where you have a, you're in a leading position, so you have a high level of success, but you are able to implement certain types of practices that enable you to reduce your level of effort and still maintain a leading position. It means that you don't have to do the work yourself, and yet the work is getting done. So, what this means is, in the software world, that means that you are able to develop a program, and the program is able to do the work for you. And in the business world, it means that you are able to delegate some of the tasks to some of the people that you're managing. So it means that you have become respected in the industry and you have been recognized for your ability to create processes. And so now it's your job to teach other people how to do the process. And then at some point, they are going to be able to do that work without your help. Or it means that you are going to recognize the opportunity to purchase new equipment. Or it means that you are able to establish some type of system that people follow, where people follow rules. And by following those rules, you still get the outcome which you desire. So there's a lot of different ways that you can implement some type of automation in your system so that you don't have to do that job yourself anymore, but you can still enjoy the result. And this is what we mean when we, as we mentioned at the beginning of this chapter, when we talked about your ability to own a process, because it means that you are able to um, gain some benefit from having developed a process, but you no longer have to do the work yourself. So now it's time to imagine what types of processes that you would like to automate, and what are the different strategies that you're going to use to automate those processes so you can reduce your level of effort but still maintain a high level of success. Okay, so it's going to build a. No. All right, so now obviously what we're going to do, obviously, obvious to me, this manual was because we wanted to facilitate, we want to have a teacher be able to facilitate the experience with a student. And then, and like, what are we ending on? Like, as you get to the end of this educational experience, we need to be able to onboard students to become teachers. And so this is where we tell them that um, they can make some money by promoting this application, by using it and promoting this application. What does it say? Final summary. Why did I do that? My project log, section 3. Okay, left side. Okay, here we go. Right side. You see, it's I see. Okay, never mind. I see what's going on now. There we go. Okay, so here's the manual. Section 1 is the engine of effort, is the mechanics of action, and then it's the process value chain. Now, although I don't think that there were 9 units. Anyways, we have the raw material, which is great, which was really what I was hoping for, is to get this raw material. Now, the last section, I got 10 minutes before my French lesson. I want to get this out now. Okay, let's just do this really quickly. We got 5. Parkinson's law. Let's begin. All right, let's begin. Now that you've completed the course, I want you to understand the mission of Qubit. The mission of Qubit is to help young people to understand that if they continually focus on the wrong things, meaning if they are unable to list the tasks that they need to get done, and if they are unable to take those tasks and turn them into subtasks, and if they're unable to recognize what their priorities are, which subtasks they should work on, then it's likely that they're going to spend much of their life doing things which they shouldn't be doing. Or in other words, they're going to spend a lot of their time doing non-priority subtasks. And as people do more and more non-priority subtasks, then they are going to find that the results that they achieve in their life are going to be less than the results that they could achieve if they would focus on the most important things. Sometimes we talk about the idea of 4 squares: what is important and what is urgent. And there's this one square which is important and urgent. And we really need to focus our attention on trying to get as many important and urgent things done so that we have more time to spend on important and not urgent. But unfortunately, a lot of people are spending their time doing things which are not important and urgent, or not important and not even urgent. And so what's happening is they're not getting the results that they want from their life. And this is causing all kinds of emotional issues. And sometimes people, they don't recognize that the emotional issues that they have are because they're making the little micro habits. They're not completing the right type of subtasks. They're not putting the right subtasks into a position of priority, and therefore they're not getting done. Or they just don't have the right kind of environment where they have spark triggers set up and facilitation triggers set up. And most importantly, they don't have a mentor. And so we want to invite you to become a mentor inside of our app. And when we talk about this concept of automation, there is an opportunity here related to automation that will enable you to earn a little bit of money while you are mentoring other people. And the idea is that we want you to be a mentor. We want you to be a coach. So you are going to be, now that once you finish the student path, and you start to learn how to use the app and you become good at using the app, then you are going to start to figure out how you can create marketing messages and try to attract attention to, for example, your social media, or you're going to talk to people that you believe could benefit from this message, and you are going to start to role play the teacher role. If you've had the benefit of having a mentor that's guided you through using this app, then they will also benefit as they help you to do different marketing and advertising activities in order that you can find people to help too. Or maybe you go out into your community and you find people that you believe could benefit from this message. And the idea is that you are going to guide them through the educational courses that you have just completed. Now, the benefit of becoming a mentor is that if you're able to mentor or facilitate this educational process a certain amount of times each month, then you will be able to have a benefit from any of the people that you teach who eventually decide to take more, decide to pay for the app and become a part of the Qubit community. So, for example, if you teach 10 people during the month and some of those people decide to pay for the app, then you are going to receive a percentage of the money that they pay for the app. And it's not just a one-time fee. Every time they pay, every month that they pay for that app, then you are also going to receive a certain percentage of the money that they pay for the app. Now, this is going to be a two-layer deep opportunity. So the first opportunity that you're going to have is to facilitate the process of learning. You're going to be a mentor for this specific course and help people to start using the app, get them started and get them focused on creating tasks and doing those subtasks and figuring out what their priorities are, helping them to understand how to set alarms and helping them to understand how to get the most out of the application. But in addition to that, you will also be able to make a little bit of commission when a student, one of your students also becomes a teacher. So let's say that you have a student and they are paying for the app for 1 month. You're going to get a percentage from that first student. Now imagine your student then gets a student that they are teaching. You are also going to get a small percentage from the monthly fee that the student of your student pays. And so we're hoping that this will motivate you to be a great mentor, meaning that you are going to find new students and help them to onboard and start using Qubit, and that you will also teach your students how to become mentors, and which means that you're going to be using the Qubit app to some extent to help you to create tasks which will direct your energy at finding new people that could benefit from the app. And what will happen as you have more students that you are teaching and you're earning some money from those students who are paying for the app, you are also going to be earning a little bit of money as those students find more students, which means that your opportunity to earn money and also to do good in the world will work in tandem as you are completing your tasks and as you are focusing on your priorities. So I'd like to welcome you to become a mentor and to start teaching the things that you've learned and also to help your students so that they can become mentors too. Yes, in fact. So actually, I recognized that this was like we've completed the whole thing. That's nice that it actually recognized that. I'm curious about how it's going to format the document. Wow, so that was really interesting. Merry Christmas, everybody. I'm here all by myself in Georgia. It's actually not Christmas Day in Georgia, by the way. They don't have Christmas here until January 7th. It's called Orthodox Christmas. There we go. And let's see if Google my Christmas present. Course 1. Yeah, but this is just a summary. This isn't actually the whole full course. All right, it doesn't matter. It's fine. All right, I got to go. I got a lesson. I got a French lesson. It's not going to copy. It's frozen anyways. Okay. Just going to copy and paste this in my other document. I got 2 minutes before my French lesson. Yeah, it's fine. Okay, so we did it. Amazing. I'm not really sure what we're going to do next, but I'm sure we'll figure it out tomorrow. Bye-bye.